Joseph sold into slavery. Jacob lived in Canaan, the land God promised to his grandfather Abraham. Jacob had 12 sons, and he loved them all, but one of them was his favorite. His name was Joseph. Jacob made a beautiful coat for Joseph as a symbol of his deep love for him. When Joseph wore his coat, his brothers became jealous of him and treated him poorly. To make matters worse, Joseph had a dream that made his brothers very angry. In his dream, he and his brothers were gathering bundles of grain. Joseph's bundle then stood up tall while his brothers' bundles bowed down to his. Joseph's brothers yelled at him, "What? Do you think you are going to rule over us? Who do you think you are?" Then Joseph had another dream. In this dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to him. The sun symbolized his father, the moon was his mother, and the 11 stars were his brothers. This time, Joseph's father became angry with him. He said, "Shall your mother and I and your brothers really bow down to you?" As unlikely as that seemed, Jacob remembered the dream. He wondered if it would come true. But Joseph's brothers became envious. Their hatred for Joseph continued to grow. One day, Joseph's brothers were tending their flocks out in the fields. Jacob sent Joseph to check on them and bring a report back to him. Joseph went looking but couldn't find them in Shechem. A man told him to check in Dothan. That's where he found them. While Joseph was still a long way off, his brothers recognized him and said, "Here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him and throw his body into a pit. We can tell our father that a wild beast attacked him. We'll make sure those silly dreams he had will never come true." But the oldest brother, Reuben, spoke up and said, "No, let's not kill him. Let's throw him into a dry waterhole out in the wilderness." Reuben's plan was to come back later and rescue Joseph and take him back to their father. Reuben didn't actually care about Joseph. He just wanted to gain his father's favor by being Joseph's rescuer. When Joseph arrived, his brothers tore off his colorful coat and threw him into the empty waterhole. Then they sat down to enjoy a meal. Joseph would die of thirst in the pit if they left him there. As a group of traders on their way to Egypt appeared in the distance, one brother, Judah, had an idea. "You know, we don't want to be blamed for Joseph's death. After all, he is our brother. Let's sell him as a slave to these traders." So that's what they did. They sold Joseph to the traders for 20 pieces of silver. Reuben was gone when all this occurred. When he returned and saw that his brothers had sold Joseph, he became worried. "What am I going to do?" he thought. "How am I going to explain this to our father?" One of the brothers had an idea. "I know," he said. "Let's dip Joseph's colorful coat in goat's blood and take it to our father. Then he will think some wild animal ate Joseph. And more importantly, he won't think we had anything to do with Joseph's death." The brothers tore up Joseph's coat, killed one of their goats, and dipped the coat in the goat's blood. When they brought the coat to their father, he believed Joseph was devoured by a wild animal. Jacob was very sad and cried for days and days. Yet his sons didn't tell him that Joseph was actually still alive. When the traders arrived in Egypt, they sold Joseph to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. Joseph was a good servant to Potiphar, but he ended up in prison for something he didn't do. While in prison, Joseph helped some of Pharaoh's servants by telling them what their dreams meant. One night, Pharaoh had a troubling dream of his own. None of his wise men understood the meaning of the dream. Pharaoh was upset until one servant remembered that Joseph had the ability to understand dreams. Pharaoh called for Joseph, and Joseph told him the meaning. Pharaoh was so pleased that he made Joseph the ruler over all Egypt. 7 years later, there was a terrible famine. Jacob sent Joseph's brothers to Egypt to buy food. They met Joseph again and bowed before him just like in Joseph's dreams. Joseph forgave his brothers and believed that God gave him his position in Egypt to rescue his family from the famine. God had a plan all along, and Joseph was glad to be a part of it. He knew God loved him no matter how others treated him.